I ended my first session on the discussion of co-pact, where I was telling you something about kinesics, oculexes, and proxemics. Now I'm going to start my discussion on paralanguage. And paralanguage is not just like a language. Actually, it is for example, the tone, the intonation, the pronunciation, the stress that plays a vital role. I'm going to share my notes with you. I again repeat that these notes can be used as primary data, secondary data, can be used as a backup plan. You can even edit, but please don't delete anything because they are designed according to the syllabi that has been given to you. You can add on, you can decrease the length where you wish like. Okay, start. So I was telling you about the non-verbal communication, the co-part, that is the kinesics, the oculexes, and the proxemics. Now I'm going to tell you something about paralanguage. Paralanguage is actually not language as a word suggests that it will be something that like that of a language. It's basically not language. It is the features of language, the features of spoken language, like how we articulate, how we pronounce, how we put forward our things, the way we pronounce them, what is the tone, the rising, the falling, or whatever way you wish like. It's just like that. So paralanguage is where you present with the quality of the voice. Like if I'm shouting, then my pitch will be very high. If I am explaining something, my pitch will be, yeah, my volume will be very normal. Like you must have come across this saying, way, yeah, you must have come across this saying where it is said that you must add weight to your argument and not to your volume. So that is where you come across the term paralanguage. Okay. Now we'll come to the next concept, that is artifacts. Artifacts are objectives. Like what I am telling you is the background of communication, the background of non-verbal communication. Artifacts. Artifacts are objectives. They are the personal representation of the persona and the environment. Like, for example, if you keep your room clean or you keep your room tidy, so it tells a lot about you. Like, for example, few people have, you must have watched that movie Two States, in which the actor, what do you call that person, Kapoor, Arjun Kapoor, he goes to his girlfriend's house, Alia Bhatt's house in South, and he says, it seems like the thieves have robbed this house and they didn't like the furniture, so they have left it behind. The house had minimal things in it. But if you come to the north, the culture is that of more of cluttering. We clutter a lot and we say, "Kaam aayega." The thing never comes to use. But we still have a habit of accumulating, cluttering, and that is what in Urdu you can call israf. When you create, accumulate, you keep on collecting things. They speak a lot about you. Okay, like the books you read, the pen that is in your pen stand, everything that you use, even your bag, your wallet, your belt, your clothes, they all speak a lot about you because these are the accessories you use. There are physical artifacts like a wedding ring. For example, if I take a example of wedding ring, then it's physical artifact. It describes my status. But in West, in West, you'll find that in America, it is worn on the left. But in Europe, it is worn on the right. But in Indians, you can never define a woman wearing a ring and term her as married because even unmarried girl can even an unmarried girl can even wear a ring. Indian woman in Indian cultural context can be defined as married with a bindi, a mangalsutra, which is a artifact, which is actually a significant point that you see a woman wearing that and you say, okay, she is married. Like Hrithik Roshan wears his brand. Okay, so these non-verbally communicate. They actually advertise. Like Hrithik Roshan wearing his own brand advertises it. Like objectives like personal, clothes, jewelry, accessory, glasses, the way you decorate your room, even the type of car you drive. It tells a lot about you. Shared, like two or more people share the office. Like for example, as I told you in my last sector, 108 is my office, but I share it with a couple of people. There are a couple of colleagues along with me. So the way I keep my table, the way I keep my almirah, the way I keep my drawer, it tells a lot about me. If it's cluttered, if it's untidy, then it talks a lot about me. But if it's tidy, spick and span, and everything is in place, if I ask you go and fetch me that attendance register, it is there in the drawer, and you open it, and you feel as if you have opened a Pandora box. What kind of an impression are you going to carry about me? That it can be personal, it can be shared. For example, if you talk about emblem, then emblem is something like, for example, a uniform, army uniform, police uniform. Shared can be between two people, but public is a community physical space or an artifact where, like, for example, Imambara, it's a public place. Okay, and you can differentiate between people. Like, for example, if you look at a Sikh person, he'll be wearing a turban, a Sikh. So, if you want to differentiate between a policeman and an army man, you can differentiate between them by looking at their uniforms. Now, one thing can be personal, can be shared, and can be public artifact at the same time. For example, a wedding ring. It can be personal if I'm wearing that, but because my husband has the matching ring, so it becomes a shared artifact. But it is a public artifact if people are looking at me and guessing that I am married. For example, Oval Office in the US White House. Every president chooses his own furniture and other artifacts like paintings and everything. They tell a lot about their personality, the physical appearance, the body type, the height, the hair, skin, the color, what you call it, a racist thinking. In US, thin is in, but in Africa, if you put on a bit of extra weight, that means affluence. Body art, makeup, tattoos, they talk a lot about you. Like geishas in Japanese culture, their makeup is entirely different. In India, the makeup is entirely different. In India, you take up many brides. Like if you're talking about a Bong bride, Bengali bride, she'll look different from a Marathi bride because the Marathi bride will be wearing like a nose pin which is designed like a hook and which almost all looks like a seal cut. It's like somewhat like you can say what do you call an Hindi curry. It looks like that. It looks like a mango. But if you look at a Himachali bride, a Pahari bride, she'll wear a big, huge nose ring. If you look at a Rajasthani bride, she'll be wearing a borla. So these are basic different types which everybody dresses up with different artifacts they use. Even tattoos speak a lot about you. If I say if somebody has their body tattooed with Mahadev, Maima, the birds, the butterfly, they tell a lot about their spirit. In West, women are more into this because even the brands of the clothes tell a lot about you. If you are wearing a Gucci or a Dolce and Gabbana, if you're using a Prada bag, it talks a lot about you. So these are artifacts. They even communicate. The bangles, the jewelry, the clothes, even the school bag that you use tells a lot about you. Okay, so now we'll move on to chronomics. Chronomics is time dimension. Now, time dimension can be put in various zones. For example, if I talk about the biological zone, it's like when to start the school. Like in India, the school begins around 7:30, 8, 7. But in West, the school begins a bit later, say 9:30 or 10. Why? Because they feel that if the child is supposed to come at 7:30, the child will get around 6 a.m. in the morning, which according to his sleep structure is almost all midnight. and the child won't be able to finish off and have a complete sleep, which will not make him into a healthy being. So, in that case, in order to have a very good night's sleep, the child is let to sleep and have school a bit later. So, that is biological. Our body is lazy. You just um, sometimes we feel lazy, but there are certain time zones which have been defined as chronomics as the lazy time zones. Observe yourself around 10 a.m. in the morning, 2 p.m. in the afternoon, and 4 p.m. in the evening, you would feel lack of energy. Like if I come to the college, I feel very energetic, but around 10, I need a cup of tea or a bite. After my lunch at 1, around 2 or 2:30, 2ish, I'll feel a craving for a cup of tea or coffee. Around 4, you say that it's time to leave leave from college around 5, but I feel a lot low at that time. What I do is that I go for a cup of coffee. So these are the time zones which always makes you feel low energy. They are personal time zones where time flies. For example, you are watching a movie with your best friend, or you are having a chit chat with your best friend. You have gone to a house. It's where the time flies. Then there are physical, like for example, there is a time for festivals. There is appropriate time for everything. In certain cultures, there is appropriate time for alcohol even. You cannot have alcohol every time. Then there are culture. Now, if you talk about cultural chronomics, then it can be monochromatic and monochronic and polychronic. Monochronic is even termed as M time, and polychronic is termed as P time. In monochronic or M time, you do one thing at a time. Like in US, where they equate money with time and time with money. Time saved is money earned. Money is as important as time because they are synonymous for them. So they do one thing at a time. They make a calendar of everything. If you talk about the polychronic or this is a P time, you do multiple things at a time. So basically, like in US, Germany, Scandinavia, and Japan, they follow the M time. P time is very flexible. In Latino culture, there is a term manana. I'm not talking about the Hindi manana कि कोई गुस्सा हो गया तो manana है. No, not that. It's a Latino term which means manana, and manana means that I can do it later, and I will do it, but I will do it if nothing important or urgent comes up. I have every intention of doing it unless and until something else comes up. The countries like Africa, South Asia, and Arab countries follow the culture of P time, that is polychronic time, where they do multiple things at the same time. Even status affects our time. Like, for example, if I say I go for an interview, I'll wait. Why? Because I am in need of the job. So I'll do the waiting. The interviewer won't do the waiting. Then talking. Like the person who belongs to the higher status does much of the talking. If I am in a meeting with my dean or director, then most of the talking will be done by my dean or director. Why? Because he is higher in status. So my time is not important as his time is. Work, the boss has more control over time. Like for example, he can cancel meeting, he can call up meeting, but I don't have that thing with me. Why? Because I'm junior. Now, where do you put yourself? You have to decide. Are you P time follower or an M time follower? But there is one thing that everybody does. People are complacent about time. They try to drag on things. They want to put it for tomorrow. Albert Einstein has rightly said, time is just an illusion. It's nothing but illusion. It's in your mind. It doesn't exist as such. Okay, so now that we have completed kinesics, oculexis, proxemics, paralanguage, artifacts, chronomics, we come to the last but the most important aspect of non-verbal communication, that is touch. Touch is technically even known as haptics or tactilism. Okay, it is even termed as like that. So touch is Like in West, women are more touchy than men. It is powerful, and touch is used to denote a lot of communication. You can communicate a lot with touch. Like if you have come across this term 8 second hug. 8 second hug is a very long hug, and if you give it to somebody, they feel that warmth. A child, when is born, he doesn't know anything. He's happy, he's happy go lucky round types. But when he sees his mother, he starts crying, and the moment the child is given to the mother, the child is crying and sobs comparatively subside. Why? Because that touch. He has spent that time, that those long 9 months with her, that he knows the smell and the touch of that body. There is this thesis, this research on rhesus monkeys. Rhesus monkeys is a research which was done, and they were brought up in this isolation and in prison. Like they are brought up in zoo, the way they are brought up in zoo. So there was two cages. They were designed in such a way. One was made of terry cloth, and one was a simple wire, um, sort of a stand which had a feeder attached to it. Whenever the urge to have something was very big, the monkey was really very hungry, then he went to the wire cage where the feeder was attached. Otherwise, the racist monkeys spent most of the time in the terry cloth confinement. Why? Because the cloth was very soft, the touch was very warm, and it felt like a motherly touch. So it was seen that they gave more importance to touch than to sustenance. In Latino culture, hug and peck on the cheek is common, even for a stranger. Touch involves many things: whom, when, and how to touch. These are three important things that you have to remember. We even touch playfully, like even in a lighter mood. But if it's continuous, then it is put into the category of intimacy. Actually, touch has been much research has been done in the field of touch, and it is found that touch is very important basic need. And people unfortunately stress upon the physical ability of sight and speaking, but touch is the first and basic thing that has to be developed in the child when the fetus is growing. Touch is very important. The sense of touch is very important. If the sense of touch is not um, this thing if it's not created, if it's not found in the child, then the survival of the child is in great jeopardy. Touch is even important as a basic need. It's good for physical and mental health. Richard Heslin gave the concept of intimacy continuum, that is, the zones where the quality of the touch changes. Like, for example, if we talk about the functional or the professional zone, then I would take the example of a doctor. The doctor's touch is entirely functional, he's just performing his function, his touch is entirely professional. But if we come into the zone of social or polite zone, then if you say there's a handshake or an obligatory kiss on the cheek, maybe the kissing on the cheek is not there in the culture, but the handshake or touching the feet is in our culture. If you say the friendship zone, then you have a lot of more warmth, which is very genuine. Love, that is between the zone of love, that is intimacy between mother and child, a woman and a husband. But if the touch increases, then it comes into the category of sexuality. It may be a good touch, it may be a bad touch. So, according to the feeling of the touch, we define this. Now, if we move on to our topic, Then we have body movement gestures, which are example of non-verbal, as I've already explained. They are defensive and offensive postures. Like if I cross my arms, it is a defensive, and if I open my arms and I you throw my arms a lot in argument, it means I am being very offensive. Facial expressions are very important because you don't even realize, and the expressions go and come. Like if your eyes are brimmed with tears, or if you are smiling. Like for example, there is a recent ad which is being aired on the television, where people are wearing masks and they are given ice creams, walls, quality walls, and that their eyes are full of shine, the smile, and when they take off their mask, they're actually smiling. So that when that smile goes to their eyes, even that is where communication on the face comes. Space, as I've told about proxemics, the territoriality, the personal space, the other space, the public zone, and all that. Touch is even considered as positive and negative, because when you are a young child, you are taught about the good touch and the bad touch. As clothing, hairstyle, jewelry, the watches, anything that you carry along with you is the artifact that I've already discussed. What I'm going to discuss at length is the body language, like a simple use of thumb, like the directness, the warmth. It conveys a lot of sincerity. For example, I shake your hand, I hold it very firmly. Suppose now let's cancel this and go back a bit backward. And suppose if we are sitting in a meeting, and you and I'm your senior and you are my junior, and we are waiting for a promotion for a project. We are about to be given a project, and I'm senior and I'm most deserving. But you get that project and you're my junior. I stood up, I stand up, and I move towards you, and I give you a firm handshake with a lot of warmth, and I pat your shoulder with the other hand. If I say, "Hearty congratulations, son, well deserved. And if you need any help or guidance, please contact me." Is this genuine? Or I'm giving you a second example where I hold your hand clumsily and I say, "Hearty congratulations." What is more genuine? Maybe I'm not able to explain you the significance of touch in video lecture, but definitely the tone, the touch, the way I pat your shoulder with my second hand, the free hand, speaks a lot. Or if I hold your hand firmly with my second hand, even I cup your hand with my both the hands, it talks about a lot of positivity that is flowing from me. Then there is eye contact. Eye contact is very important because 3.25-second eye contact, it shows a lot of trustworthiness. But if you remove your eye contact, it shows that you are not very trustworthy. Now the next thing is facial expressions. If we talk about facial expressions, there are array of expressions that go from one to other. There are different expressions. Every person has so many this expressions. Like Socrates once said, I don't remember the whole quotation correctly, but he said that self abasement, vulgarity, happiness, sadness, love, hatred, everything reflects on your face. If you are happy, it reflects. If you're sad, it reflects. If you're angry, it will reflect. The effect of facial expression in conversation is instantaneous. Our brain registers a feeling, and without knowing, our face shows that. Posture is the position of our body, the way we sit. If I sit a bit diagonal in the chair, it shows my power. If I am sitting on the edge of the chair and putting my hands on the table, it shows my need. But if I'm laid back and relaxed, it shows my casual behavior. You must know where your neck, or rather your backbone ends. Touch, as I've already told you, matters a lot. It's how you should grab a person, how you should hold one person. For example, if I hold your hand, okay, so it conveys a lot of feelings. And if you are crying and I pat your back, I'm holding your hand and I'm patting your hand with the back on the back of your hand with my other hand. It conveys a lot of feelings. The next thing is space. As I've already explained to you in detail, it is about the anthropologist Edward T. Hall, where he has discussed about various zones. But I've even added to your knowledge by telling you about the territoriality. Territoriality is really very important and significant feature in communication. Then, if you go according to the kinds of communication, there are other types of even the other types of communication are even there. Like for example, technical and general communication. I'll take the example of general communication first. I'll discuss in general communication. Basically, general communication is like what you do every day. There is no technicality involved. What you do is that it contains a general message. It's mostly informal in style and approach. It does not follow a set pattern of communication. It's mostly oral. It does not involve any use of technical vocabulary, jargon, or graphics. Expressions are very important in general communication. It is applicable type. Like if I'm discussing something, I'm talking to you generally. For example, if I'm taking a class and you come out following me and you seek my advice on something, or you need my counseling, that is some kind of a general communication where it's mostly oral, and your gestures, postures, your communication, your touch, and the space you maintain and the paralanguage in which you communicate matters a lot. And it talks about a process. It is in a process, it goes on in a process. It's reciprocal. For example, if I'm saying something, you will say something, then I some say it's an ongoing process. It's not always used for a specific audience or a purpose. For example, communication, if we talk about technical communication, it is meant for a technical audience, defined audience with a specific purpose and with a specific jargon. But in general communication, you cannot put it that way because it's always general. It is not meant for a specific audience. It does not involve any kind of technical vocabulary, and it is not even like for example a specific person. It can be for anybody. It can be for me. It can be for your class fellow. It can be for your friend, for your relative, or your colleague, anyone. Like if you talk about, on the contrast, we talk about the technical communication. It contains a technical message. It is mostly formal. You have to have a lot of formalities attached to it. For example, you cannot if I want to make a proposal, I cannot make a proposal and send it like anything. I have to seek the permission. I have to have a request for proposal. Then only I can design it. It follows a set pattern. Like for example, if I want to communicate with you, so I'll have to email you. Then you will email me back, and then in that trail mail, every communication will go on. So it follows a set pattern. It can be both oral and written. Like for example, I'm teaching right now. I'm doing technical communication, but I am doing it orally. But what notes I'll give you or I'll post in your Google Classroom, that is written communication. It involves a lot of technical vocabulary. I'm completely sure that you must not have come across the terms like ideation, territoriality, artifacts, chronemics, kinesics. These are not the terms we generally use in day-to-day walk of life. These are technical vocabularies, and we don't use it like that. Like for example, if I ask you how many people in India speak English, how many people know Hindi, so you'll represent it in a graph or a pie chart. That is a graphical presentation. It is experience based even. The way you conduct your business, the way you conduct your day to day technical communication, it is even based on experience. Like if you want to know about a person, there are three E's you can judge a person by: experience, education, and environment. And technical communication is entirely based upon experience. Okay, then it is solution type. It is solution type. So you have to find a solution in technical communication. In general communication, you need not to find a solution. Yeah, like it's a normal conversation. We are talking, we are having a general communication. But if you are having a technical communication, then it is solution type. Like if I come with you with a problem like a mathematical problem, it's a technical problem. So you have to come out with a solution. It talks about a product or a service. Like if we say that I want to buy a laptop and I seek your advice. If I say what kind of a laptop should I go for, and you tell me it's about its RAM, ROM, about its features, technical features. So you're talking about a product. Or if I ask you about what kind of a plan should I take for my internet connectivity, Wi-Fi, so you're talking about the service. It's always technical and it is used for a specific audience. Like for example, in the beginning of the lecture, I told you that this is communicative English and this is meant for the students of BSc. This syllabi has been specially designed for BSc students. It's a communicative English course, and it is in for the use of defined audience. That is the specific audience. That is the BSc students. Getting so, by far, I think I am able to do justice on technical and general communication. Now I'll move on to the second part, that is the social communication or business communication. Social communication skills refer to all the skills we need when using language to communicate. Like, for example, there are n number of or ranges of language, maybe to provide information, to question, to negotiate, to suggest, or to clarify. Then there are conversational skills like starting and finishing a conversation, maintaining a decorum or a continuum of a conversation, or taking turns in a conversation. Shared understanding or assume knowledge, where how much information the listener needs to understand. I need to know whether you know about the subject or what I'm telling you is sufficient. Understanding the uses of verbal and non-verbal communication skills, like how much eye contact. For example, if you're I'm looking at you and teaching, and I've been looking at you for the past 2 minutes, it will not be considered an eye contact. It will be considered staring, and staring is negative. It's not considered a good chronemic communication. Then facial expressions, the gestures, the proximity and distance, which we have already discussed in detail. The understanding of the implied meaning. What is the meaning that you need to put? Because meanings are implied and they are situational. Okay, communication is very effective if you go according to the planning, organizing, staffing, directing, and controlling. These are the tools of management that you have to keep in mind so that you have an effective communication and there are no barriers. Business communication involves constant flow of information. You cannot stop your communication. It's an ongoing process. Feedback is integral unless and until the receiver tells the sender or informs the sender what he has understood, then it is very impossible for the sender to understand in which fashion or in which meaning, in which perspective that he sent the message has been received in the same perception by the receiver or not. For the growth of the organization, business communication is very important, and feedback plays a very vital role. If you talk about business communication, it is very goal oriented. It is based on the policies of the company or the organization. This is how you communicate with the people within the organization and with people outside the organization. Business communication is regulated by norms and rules. You cannot contact anyone anytime anywhere. There are certain ethics you have to follow. They are known as the professional ethics, and they are very important in business communication. Like the technology, the cell phone, the video calls, the conferencing, the emails, and the satellite communication, they support the business communication a lot. And the most effective business communication is reached when you have a goodwill of the organization. Business communication can be divided into two parts: the oral communication and the written communication. Day to day business is like general communication, it is done orally. Like, for example, if I call a meeting, or rather, I conduct an interview. Like, for example, if you go for a job, you'll have to first go into the group discussion, that is the GD. You'll be given a topic and you'll have to speak about it. And then you'll go for the PI, that is a personal interview round. There are speeches that I can call you about. Then there is a very beautiful communication running in an organization that is known as informal communication, which is even termed as grapevine. I'll tell you something about grapevine in detail sometime. Right now, you must understand that it means gossip. Gossip, it's like I tell you in detail because it's a very vast topic. But if you see somebody somewhere and you gossip around with your colleagues, and do you remember you used to play telephone when you were little kids? I don't know whether you played or not. My generation used to play it a lot. When one person used to say something, uh, actually whisper in somebody's ear, the second whisper to the third, and the fourth, and the so on. And then the 10th person used to say something, and believe me, it always turned out something else. It's just like gossiping. When you tell somebody something, they add a bit of flavor, they add a bit of their turn and twist, and they present it. And then there is written communication, like, for example, letters, reports, proposals, the agendas, the reports, the manuals. These are all written communication. An organization cannot run without written communication. For example, I cannot say that you give me this product or service, I'll pay you 40 lakh rupees. You cannot trust me unless and until I have that goodwill, which I've spoken to you already about. But you cannot, remain on the word itself. You'll have to have a written guarantee that I'll pay you 40 lakh rupees, which is a huge amount. For me, even 500 is a huge amount. For you, might be 40 lakhs is a huge amount. For somebody, crores may not be a huge amount. So it entirely depends upon person to person. The business is run on written communication because there is viability, there is the credibility of the person attached. Okay. Now, before we move on to the personal communication, I want to give you a refresher that what I have by far taught you about. I have given you a brief description of communication. I have told you what are the types of communication, like verbal, which is written and oral, and non-verbal communication, where I've taught you about the COPAC and discussed everything in detail in these notes. And then I've told you about the technical and the general communication, the social and the business communication. Thus, I come to an end of my second lecture series. I'll be back soon on my third with my third lecture, and I'll be beginning from personal communication. So keep safe. I'll come back to you soon. Thank you so much.